Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Alpha's Arcane Bride. Episode 8. Chris, the tension between Rayan and me was so obvious. I was doing my best to keep my shit together, but it wasn't easy, looking at her in that dress that wrapped perfectly around her figure, emphasizing her every curve, not to mention of hers. She was the hottest girl around, like a prize I wanted to unwrap and devour. I had tried to call one of the pack she-wolves to keep me company, but I couldn't even enjoy it, not when all I could think of was her. I needed to apologize for that night. Yet at the same time, I refused to. She grated on my nerves just as much. The worst part. I had to follow her and try not to look at her. She had now gone to freshen up, and I was waiting across the hall. I took my phone out to see Lola's message. "Have you told Ray yet? You need to before he finds out, Chris. I am not going to be hiding your mess up from him." I frowned. "Yeah, I get it. I messed up. But it wasn't entirely me," she was tempting. I looked up, my eyes flashing with irritation when Rayan stepped out of the bathroom. I could smell the fresh dose of perfume she had applied. Her lips were glossier again and the hair strands that framed her face were rearranged. Her eyes met mine and I realized we were suddenly alone. For the first time since that day. Her heart was racing. I didn't know how to react. This was me, Chris Summers, Delta of the Black Storm, a man who could get a woman no matter what, but the same one who hated dealing with the aftermath. And just like that, here I was, not wanting to deal with the aftermath of what went down between us. Her eyes were filled with such strong hatred that it was like I could actually feel it. The stinging pain in my chest was a clear reminder of that. "Rayan, don't talk to me," she said coldly, turning and walking back towards the hall. "Rayan, Lola knows and she wants me to tell Rayan," I said quietly. She froze, whipping around as she looked at me in shock. Her heart only pounding harder. "How does she know?" she hissed. I was about to reply but stopped when a few girls walked past. One of them gave me a small smile, which I automatically returned, only for Rayan's scoff to bring me back to the topic at hand. "You really are a slut," she spat. The girl glanced back at her before the three entered the bathroom, exchanging looks. They were just irritating me, but it was my fault for smiling maybe. I said, clenching my jaw. "But look, Lola knows, because when I left, I couldn't risk speaking about this out here." Walking over to her, I took hold of her by the elbow and pulled her towards some doors nearby. Pushing them open, I glanced around, relieved to see that it was empty. I walked inside, pulling her towards the center of the room, glancing at the balcony doors that were slightly ajar. No one was here. "What do you think you're doing, Chris?" she growled. "Making sure no one overhears. That day your powers got out of control, remember? Lola came and I told her to take care of you. She saw the marks," I said with a frown. "Well then tell her to keep it quiet, Rayan does not need to know," she said, pulling out of my hold. "He's my best friend. I can't keep it a secret from him." "Oh, that's bullshit. Stop acting like you have a flipping conscience. We all know you're just a selfish, I really had no idea why she hated me so much. Yet, because you have this image already made in your mind about me and it's clear you're on sticking to it. Listen to me, princess. No matter what you think about me, I care for my friend. I have to tell Rayan. Don't worry, I know I stuck up and I'll take the fall. Oh, don't get so up yourself, you are not doing me any favors. I got caught up in the moment. You're nothing special. I'm glad we stopped. I wouldn't want you anywhere near me. She spat resentfully. My eyes flashed, my wolf's anger bubbling. Her gorgeous eyes that held so much resentment were getting to me, the way her chest was heaving along with the urge to simply slam her up against the wall and kiss her again, all wrapped up in one. Not that you seemed to have a problem with it when you had your hand wrapped around it. I growled. Oh please, she scoffed, rolling her eyes as she put a hand on my chest, pushing me slightly. The wrong move. She was tempting me, and I wasn't sure if she knew it or not. We both know you were the one that was hard for me. The door to the balcony slammed open, bouncing off the walls. Both Rayan and I turned sharply. Our hearts were racing as we stared at the man that stepped slowly inside. His eyes blazing green, the anger that swirled around him was suffocating, and the look on his face was more animalistic than human. Rayan. Rayan. I had decided to keep an eye on Mom and Alessandra from somewhere close, yet at the same time give them some space, opting for one of the side halls that wasn't in use. I was out on the balcony, masking my aura when I had heard Chris and Rayan. First, I wasn't even going to bother, thinking they may try to sort their issue, but the conversation that had ensued from the moment he mentioned he was going to tell me. With every passing comment, my anger was incinerating every ounce of my self-control. My eyes blazed green as I pushed the door open violently. My eyes were fixed on Chris, the one man I considered my brother. I knew his antics, but never did I think he'd ever cross that line and do it to my sister. Although he was the one who wanted to tell me, not Rayan, my anger was uncontrollable. Rayan, he said quietly. My eyes snapped to Rayan's hand on his chest. I growled as my anger broke loose and I was in front of him in a flash. He raised his hands in surrender, but it was too late as I ripped him away from her and threw him across the room, only to close the distance between us. I grabbed him, my canines out and the urge to tear him apart consuming me. Rayan, stop it! Rayan shrieked, but there was nothing more I wanted than to rip him to pieces. I growled murderously at her, throwing him across the room until I saw his back hitting the glass doors as he went crashing through onto the balcony. Rayan! She screamed, running towards him, but I reached her before she got to him. Grabbing her by the elbow, I pulled her back. Don't touch him! I hissed, glaring down into her defiant eyes. Rayan, he's bleeding. He didn't even defend himself. She cried, her eyes filled with tears as I clenched my jaw. Don't tell me she had feelings for him. Rayan, leave! I warned her. No. I'm your alpha and that's a command, Rayan. I growled, my alpha aura surging through me. Although it had an effect on her, she was trying to fight. Rayan, leave! I'm fine, Chris said, sitting up. He touched the back of his head and I saw the blood that coated his hands. Don't talk to her! I hissed. Our eyes met but he looked away. Yeah, I thought so. Rayan. Rayan tried again, angrily. I said leave. You can't tell me what. Rayan. Mom's voice came. What are you doing? Leave. I snapped, glaring at her too. Her eyes flew open in shock just as Dulsanra rushed over. My eyes met her startling blue ones. This is between Chris and me. Can you lot just leave? I said quietly. She frowned, despite the flicker of confusion I saw in them. She shook her head as Mom grabbed Rayan, pulling her away. No Mom, this is my fault. Rayan said, trying to pull out of Mom's hold. Not now, Rayan. Mom whispered. Anna. I'm okay. I'm staying, Dulsanra said firmly. Mom didn't reply, pulling Rayan from the room. Rayan. Dulsanra said, wrapping her arms around my waist. The moment the sparks rushed through me, I felt a wave of calmness rush over my body. Now paying attention to my thundering heart, the anger that rolled off me, and the fact that I had my claws out. I looked down at the top of her white head, wrapping my arms around her tiny body tightly, burying my head in her hair and trying to calm the anger I was feeling. I was not done with Chris, but my heart warmed at the fact she didn't fear me, no matter how much of my anger and rage I showed her. She looked up at me, softly kissing my lips, before pulling away and looking at Chris, who was simply sitting there frowning deeply. It isn't my place. But in the short time I've known you both, I know that you two are great friends. Don't throw that away over one disagreement. She said quietly. Holding her hand out to Chris, I growled lowly, but she glared at me. Stop behaving like an animal, Rayan. She snapped, taking me by surprise. Grabbing Chris by his arm, she tried to help him up. Tried, she was tiny in comparison to him. He got up and smoothly pulled out of her hold. Smart move. After messing around with my sister, I wanted him far away from everyone. I am an animal kitten. Especially when it comes to people hurting those I care about. I said coldly, looking at Chris. She looked at us, then turned away. Just, don't do anything you'll regret. She seemed to be unsure of what to do and was about to walk off when I grabbed her elbow and spun her back into my arms. Stay. I said quietly. I needed her, knowing that the moment she left me to my anger, I would snap once again. Besides, she was my mate, and I was not going to hide anything from her. Her heart was thundering, but a small smile graced her lips, and she nodded. At least hear me out. Chris said quietly. What are you going to do? Tell me how you got into my sister's. I asked coldly. Dulsanra's eyes widened, and she tensed, staring between us. Nothing happened. I mean, it almost did, but I walked away. He said, frowning. I know it doesn't right the wrong, but I knew I couldn't do that to her. I wanted to tell you because I feel like shit for it. I know I can't change the past, but I am sorry. Guilt was rolling off of him and I knew he regretted it. But still. It's a two-way thing, Rayan. Dulsanra whispered. I get that. I clenched my jaw. My anger was still rippling through me. I trusted you, Chris. I really did. Right now, I don't know what to think. Stay away from her, I don't want you two anywhere near each other. Understood? My voice was cold, my anger was bubbling to the surface. My aura was surging around us, and as much as I hated this, I couldn't ignore that he had crossed the line. Understood? He said quietly. He looked up at me, our eyes meeting, but for the first time in our lives, there was nothing to say. Deep down, I knew I should do more as a friend, but as a brother, I couldn't. He walked out whilst I ran my hand through my hair in frustration. Rayan. I turned towards her, my eyes flickering from green to grey as I tried to control my emotions. Her smooth, creamy skin shimmered temptingly, fell with every breath she took. My gaze snapped to her lips and I swallowed. I knew what I wanted, what would satiate this burning rage within me, but I didn't want to hurt her. I was about to turn away when she stepped closer. You need to relax, handsome. She whispered, one hand cupping the back of my neck. The other now cupped the front of me teasingly, sending off a surge of pleasure and desire that broke all the restraints that were left of my self-control. Rayan in a flash, I had her pinned against the wall not far from the shattered doors. Wrong move, kitten. I rasped, trapping her hands against the wall. My burning gaze fell to her lips and down to her, which were sticking out even more. Her scent intoxicated me, our noses brushed. Oh, actually, I think it was the perfect move. She murmured, leaning forward and crushing her lips against mine. Pleasure rushed south and I throbbed hard. Letting go of her hands, I reached down, slipping my hand into the slit of her skirt and pulling it up roughly just as she snaked her arm around my neck, the other massaging me already hardening. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That was hot. Really hot. Dulsanra, there was something so hot and acting so dirty. I relished it. It awoke something in me, and I wanted more, so much more. Watching him in front of the mirror. After wrapping the skirt around me, Rayan gave me his jacket and we had left through the shattered door. He had led us swiftly to his car. His hair was half out of his bun and mine was a mess. My neck was covered in hickeys and my dress was destroyed. Luckily, we were able to head to his grandfather's mansion without any disturbances. We were let inside by one of the Omegas. Rayan was supporting my weight fully. My legs felt like jelly even now. We were then shown to our rooms. The woman was very professional. If seeing me in such a state shocked her, she didn't let on and led us to a gorgeous room. It was a Victorian-style mansion, and the decor of the rooms was similar to the exterior of the house. A large wooden oak bed stood in the center of the room with navy bedding and the rest of the wardrobes were made of the same wood. Our stuff was already set to the side of the room and Rayan locked the door before pulling me into his arms. I let the skirt that I had just been holding around my waist fall and wrapped my arms around his neck. "Shall I run us a bath?" I asked softly. A small smirk crossed his lips as he nodded. "How about you sit down, and I'll run us a bath?" he said, kissing my lips. Sparks rushed through me. He lifted me bridal style, carrying me to the bathroom before placing me on the edge of the tub and beginning to run the bath, taking his phone from his pockets and placing it on the counter before taking his waistcoat and shirt off. I dragged my eyes away from him, knowing that if I didn't, I'd be wanting round 2. I looked around the cozy bathroom with its wooden floors and counter, vintage-style tub, and sink. It was lovely. Mind getting my smaller bag? Rayan packed me some toiletries. There's bath stuff in it, I said. I was really excited to use this stuff. Sure, kitten. I didn't miss the frown at the mention of Rayan. I would talk to him about that too, once we were in the tub because I knew he needed to talk about it. He returned with my bag. Crouching down, he unzipped it, holding it open for me so I could prowl around in it. I looked up into his soft grey eyes, my heart skipping a beat. I gave him a gentle smile. He treated me so well. I don't know if I will ever get used to it. I leaned forward, still clutching his suit jacket around me, and kissed his lips softly. Thank you, I said, taking out the stunning toiletry bag. I looked at the titles on all the mini travel size bottles and was about to take the bubble bath when I looked at the bath bomb. Rayan had gone on about how amazing they are. Lush bath bombs, typical. Rayan said, staring at the glittery gold ball that I had unwrapped. So pretty. Rayan said to just drop it in the water. I said, tossing it in. He looked at me and stared at it. It has glitter. You do know you're supposed to use those things when you're alone, he said, almost pouting. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? Well, I guess I'll just bathe alone then. I stood up, letting the jacket slide off before taking off the remnants of my red dress that no longer even covered me. I smiled slightly as I felt his gaze glued to me. I had loved that dress. I got in as Rayan undressed. I don't think so. I'll deal with 10 kilos of glitter if it means bathing with you, he said. I could feel his gaze on me as I tested the water and then turned it off. Rayan, why did you get so angry? I asked softly. I felt his anger rising, so I adjusted my position slightly, shifting so I could look at him. He looked down at me and clenched his jaw. He shouldn't have gone after Rayan, he said quietly. True, but Rayan doesn't seem the type to be pushed into anything. Don't you think it was consensual? I asked softly. He frowned deeply, staring ahead at the glittering water. Sighing and looking down at me. She seemed upset when you hurt him too, I said, placing my hand on his upper arm. Rayan dislikes Chris or always has. Come on Rayan, don't they say there's only a fine line between love and hate? Maybe she's always found him appealing but was just jealous because of his antics? He had told me about his friends and about Chris's love for escapades. He looked down at me and nodded. You might be right. He did say he backed out. Maybe that explains Rayan's anger towards him as of late. Because she didn't get what she wanted. And Rayan loves to get what she wants. He trailed off as if the realization had just dawned on him. I smiled, kissing his cht. I didn't need to say anything more. I wasn't blaming Rayan, but I know she is a woman who knew what she wants. You and Chris should talk it out, I said, running my finger down his arm, tracing the pattern of his tribal tattoo on his upper arm. You are lucky to have such amazing people in your life. Oh yeah? None that come anywhere close to you. So, I agree, I am super lucky. He K1SSCD my nose before giving me one of those delicious smirks of his. And I'm lucky to have you, I said softly. So how did it go with Mom? My smile vanished and I looked down at the water. Dulsanra? He said, the concern clear in his voice. I may have mentioned witches and it got a little tense. I sighed. She'll come around, he said, wrapping his arms around me tightly. I nodded, closing my eyes as I leant into him. I hoped so. Dulsanra the following day, we found out that Chris had gone back to the pack. Maria had heard some of what had happened and told Chris to head home. Rayan had avoided Rayan like the plague, and due to that, I didn't get to see her much. Rayan had taught me how to use the phone he had gotten me, so I was able to text her and she texted back so frequently that it kind of felt like she was right here anyway and she would text me to come to her room to get ready. She made sure I was all dolled up for every event, and when I wasn't with Rayan, she was next to me like a protective sister, keeping me away from all the she-wolves who were giving me looks. One thing that was no secret was that Rayan was very sought after. On the day of the wedding, Rayan had managed to pull Rayhana into his arms, hugging her and apologizing for his behavior. After a good scolding, she had forgiven him, telling him it wasn't her he needed to apologize to. I knew it threw him to realize his sister may have feelings for his friend, but he had simply nodded. There had been one occasion where I had seen my nails change, and I knew from the way Rayan looked at me that he noticed the change too. He didn't seem bothered by it, but it scared me. There was something wrong with me. There was also a time when I could hear a conversation that he couldn't, another thing that piqued my curiosity. Why was my hearing so heightened? We had returned last night and headed straight to bed. Today was the first day back home, in the privacy of the Rossi Palace, as I like to call it. The first time we would be alone completely as a family and the day that Rayan is going to tell his dad about me. I was beyond nervous. I had barely been able to eat breakfast, and although everyone was talking, I couldn't really focus. Alpha Raphael had told Rayan to show me around the pack. Rayan had wanted to do it anyway, so we set out soon after breakfast and he introduced me to some of the pack members we passed, who were very welcoming and polite. He showed me the training grounds, the library, the hospital, the gym, the playground, the pool, the apartments, some of the houses from outside, and so on. It was like a mini village. We hadn't even covered it all, yet we had been on the go for over 3 hours. So many people wanted to meet me. I was offered a number of treats and gifts. Rayan got someone to take the stuff back home for us. The love was overwhelming, and it scared me that it was all too good to be true, to last. Will these same people who were looking at me with excitement and adoration change their minds when my truth came out? Rayhana had accompanied us as well, and we were now heading to the pack house where most single wolves who didn't have their own places lived. We went through a side entrance that went straight to the Alpha's work office. Knocking on the door, I looked at Rayhana, who gave me a small smile. "Come on in." Alpha Raphael's voice came. "It's going to be okay," Rayan said, kissing my lips as Rayhana led the way inside. "Ah, have you three been around the pack grounds? Tell me, Anna, how did you find it?" he asked, smiling warmly. "It's lovely, everyone's so welcoming and sweet," I replied, tugging on the 3/4 sleeves of my top. Rayan took a seat and pulled me onto his lap. Rayan smirked, taking the other seat. My cheeks burned, his dad was right there. But after the teasing we got from his cousin and dad about disappearing from the party the other night, I think I should be used to it. And they should be. Everyone is so happy Rayan has found his Luna, and such a lovely, down-to-earth young woman at that. You mean most are happy, so many girls are probably crying. Rayan remarked. I felt a flare of possessiveness and leaned into my alpha, wrapping my arm around his broad shoulders, making Rayan smirk in satisfaction whilst his father chuckled. Well, that is bound to happen, but they will learn to love their Luna too, he said. I doubted that, but it was fine. Well, there's something we need to tell you, Rayan said. What is it? Alpha Raphael asked concerned, as he rested his elbows on the table. I know about Rayhana. Rayan started. His father's smile vanished, he looked at his son and sighed heavily. I see. I wanted to tell you anyway. I'm assuming Anna knows too? Your mother mentioned that Anna told her that not all witches are bad. He smiled at me, and I looked at Rayan, who gave me a small nod. I had told him I wanted to tell his father myself. Well, Rayhana may not be the only witch in this pack. My name is Dulsanra Diana Silver, and I am a witch, I said, my heart thundering despite my voice being steadfast. He looked at me in shock, before realization seemed to settle. Dulsanra, the witch who yes, the one Endora and the rogues kept captive, the one I thought died that day. Rayan said, the pain in his voice so obvious despite doing his best to mask it. Ever since he had marked me, the emotions I felt from him were so much stronger than my usual witch senses picked up before. Alpha Raphael stood up and walked around the desk. His heart was racing and the frown on his face made me nervous, but there was no anger or confusion from him. Simply sadness, guilt, and understanding. He perched at the edge of his desk and reached over, taking my hands and giving me a sad smile. I have heard from Marcel about your treatment. He often felt guilty for not being able to stop it. Endora, our mother, had him under her control most of the time. Unlike me, he isn't immune to spells that influence the mind. I am sorry for everything our mother put you through. As her son, I know my apology is nothing compared to what you have been through. He gave my hands a gentle squeeze and I felt my chest tighten with the emotions that filled the room. Mine, Rayhan's, Rayhana's, and Alpha Raphael's. He didn't need to apologize to me for something he never even did, but here he was doing it anyway, and I could feel the sincerity and pain from within him. I know an apology won't take away that trauma, abuse, or nightmares, but know that I will always be here for you if you ever need me. Welcome to the family, Dulsanra. I struggled to fight back the tears that were welling in my eyes. How was I so lucky to have found such an amazing pack? I nodded, braving myself to speak. Thank you, Alpha. I hope you start seeing me as more than just the Alpha. One day I will hold hope that you will call me Dad. He said, his smile wrinkling the edge of his eyes, tugging me off Rayhan's lap as he stood up. I looked up at him, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a parent. I couldn't explain the feelings inside of me, but the warmth, love, and promise that held nothing but truth and sincerity made the tears spill. Papa Raf. I whispered as he wrapped his arms around my shoulders tightly. I locked my arms around his waist, feeling the tears streaming down my cheeks. Perfect. His warm reply came. No one had ever wanted me. My biological father didn't want me. No adult wanted anything to do with me. I was just a reject, an omen, bad luck. That sudden thought made my heart thunder. What if I brought ill will to these people? No. I wouldn't, I was not evil. He massaged my back gently, and I realized it was the first time I was getting a hug from a caring elder. I moved away and he placed his hand on my shoulders, giving me a gentle smile. Now that's better. I always wanted another daughter. He reached behind me and picked up a tissue. I took it, thanking him, before Rayan gripped my waist, tugging me back onto his muscular thigh. Rayan sniffed, fanning her face. Guys, seriously, you lot are getting me emotional. She exclaimed. I'm surprised you're not jealous about sharing Dad. Rayan teased her, and she rolled her eyes. We can all agree that Dad has enough love in him to share with the entire country. She said, despite standing up and giving her dad a hug, a pout on her face. We all ended up laughing whilst Rayan rolled her eyes. Hey, I am not jealous. Mum, I'm sure. Rayan mocked her before looking at me. I smiled at him, and he wiped a stray tear away, cupping my cheek and kissing me softly. I hugged him tightly, closing my eyes. I would be the best daughter, mate, and sister to them all. I may be considered darkness by most, but I had a heart that had love to give and yearned to receive. This was my family, and I will always protect them. Okay, so now that I know about Dulsanra's truth, I think we need to do something about your mother. We will tell her about Rayan first. Papa Raf said. Rayan scrunched her nose. Sounds like a plan, I'm tired of hiding. She said. Dad. You need to let Del and I study the grimoires. You know, learning to control our abilities is important. She is right. I added. I'm sure you all have been studying the books you stole from my vault. He replied nonchalantly, making his children look at him sharply. He raised an eyebrow. I think it's time I reminded you all, that I am the first Rossi, as you and Al love to proclaim. He said with amusement looking at Rayan. Wow! Rayan murmured, whilst Rayan just seemed surprised. I saw Rayan and Chris break into that vault. I have hidden cameras, but I thought to let it be. Rayan just looked floored. Actually, that was because Dulsanra was kidnapped and I had to break into the Coven of England. I asked Rayan to help. Rayan said, seriously looking at his father, who appeared shocked. It seemed the first Rossi wasn't expecting that, and I suppressed a giggle. That was risky, and you didn't think to inform me? Rayan. Dad, chill. I'm fine. Besides, we're out. Uncle Al also knows about her. And how did he react? He was fine. Says maybe this is what I need to do, to fix this conflict between our kind. Despite his words, I could sense the struggle he was feeling. Fix the conflict? I asked. I don't know about that, but above all, I need to guarantee your safety. Secondly, every single witch or werewolf who has hurt shall pay. His voice was cold. His dad looked at him with concern but said nothing. You girls can use the underground training ground for practice. Rayhana, I'm assuming Dulsanra knows more than you, so please let her lead. Rayhana nodded. Her excitement to learn was obvious. I gave her a small smile. And when do you want to have your alpha ceremony? You have found your Luna? Papa Raf asked Rayan. Not yet. If you want me to run the pack, I will do it unofficially. Rayan replied. There's some stuff I need to take care of first. Perfect. His dad replied with a nod. I knew it was because of me. I didn't want to be Luna until the pack knew my reality. The men fell silent, but I could tell they were mind-linking. Raphael smiled and gave a nod to Rayan, who stood up, his hands leaving my waist as he stretched, a move that made my core throb as he teasingly showed off the bottom of his stomach and that perfect V that showed off his well-groomed pepper of hair that dipped into the belt of his jeans. I looked away quickly, not wanting anyone to catch me drinking up how gorgeous my mate was. Shall we get going? He asked me, smirking. I knew he had caught me. Yes, unless you want to stay here for the entire day? Go ahead, I'll head back with Rayhana. I stated, trying not to show my embarrassment, spinning around and walking to the door. He chuckled as he followed. I'll drop you off home before I head out to handle something. I nodded, smiling when he leaned over and opened the door for me. I smiled up at him, leading the way out. Rayan. After walking Dulsanra home and knowing Rayhana would keep her company, I decided to go talk to Chris. I hadn't seen him since everything, and it felt weird. We had never ever argued like this, and he didn't even defend himself against me. If I could forgive Rayhana, then there was no reason why I shouldn't do the same for Chris. I found out he was in one of the gyms working out, and I was glad it was empty. He was working out on one of the lifting machines. I walked over, pulling off my own top. I did a few stretches before sitting down at the one next to him. Lying back, I gripped the weights and began doing my own lifts. Neither of us spoke, and for a moment, it just felt like old times working out together. Although I had been away for a few years for my alpha training, we had stayed in touch, and whenever I was back for a visit, it was like I had never left. Why Rayhana? I asked suddenly, without even thinking. He paused, mid-lift, before carrying on. I don't want broken bones again, so I'm not going to answer that. His reply came. I turned my head towards him, my eyes flashing in annoyance. Did you forget who she was? I asked. For a moment, yeah. His reply was quiet. What you did was wrong. You were told to guard her, not to cross certain lines. I said, now sitting up. He did the same, turning and looking at me, unwrapping the bandages he had wrapped around his hands. I know that, although you may not have heard, I stopped. It was hard, but I did it when I realized what I was doing. He said quietly. She was angry and he frowned deeply as I looked up at him. Care to share? She basically was annoyed off with me and we were arguing. Then happened. I lost control and she's no angel. He said, clearly not wanting to tell me exactly what happened. Whatever it was that he was hiding, he was covering for Rayan. Yeah, I know that. Heck, Ri. It took two, even I know that. I get that. But she is not one of your one-night funds, Chris. She can't be. I said quietly. Yeah, I know. She'll probably find her mate at the next mating ceremony. He muttered. Was he actually affected by that? I mean, he didn't care if a she-wolf found her mate. Probably. Are you going to attend the next one? No. He said quietly, looking at his hands. Happy with your one-nighters? I remarked. He gave me a cold glare, his piercing green eyes meeting mine. Those don't really seem so appealing anymore. He muttered. Those words surprised me, but I wondered if there was more to it with Rayan. Was it wrong to restrict them if that was the case? I guess I'll keep an eye on them. If there was more to it and they wanted to pursue it, I wouldn't stand in their way. Chris never did relationships, and if Rayan meant more to him, then who was I to stop them? I just didn't want him hurt, if the blood moon came and Rayan found her mate. Nor did I want him to hurt her. I'm sorry for hitting you, I shouldn't have lost it. I said, looking him directly in the eye. Yeah, you shouldn't have. It was a move but I don't blame you, man. Chris said, giving me a smirk. She is your sister, after all. Yeah. I said, giving him a small smile. I was glad we'd sorted our crap out. Tonight, we need to meet the girls and have a movie night or something. Del might like it too. Yeah. If it's okay, mind if I call Rayan? She and Dulsanra are getting pretty close. That's your call, and if she wants to, I don't have an issue with it. He said. I didn't reply, lying back down on the bench. Yeah, I'll ask her. I wasn't going to let my ego get in the way of ruining any of my relationship. Dulsanra. It was the following day, and I was spending some time with Rayan. We read through the grimoires, but I made sure we started with simple spells. I was also teaching her how controlling emotions and channeling them would help. I wasn't able to do many spells thanks to the seal on my powers. We were now currently taking a break. Rayan had been here up until 20 minutes ago when he left as he had some alpha work to attend to. I was fiddling with my new phone that I loved. I'd never really had one, and the ones I knew how to use were so much more basic than this. Rayan had even downloaded music for me and set up some social media accounts. I had taken several pictures with Rayan. He was currently the wallpaper on my phone, his arm around me as I kissed his neck whilst he was looking at the screen with a grin on his face. So, I was thinking. Rayan spoke, bringing me out of my thoughts. You said your powers are sealed, right? And the spell is strong? Yes, but maybe these books have the answers. I sighed, placing my phone down. We were both sitting cross-legged on the stone floor. It was cold down here, but it was clear it didn't affect Rayan as much as it did me. Would you need a strong witch to unseal it? She asked. I frowned, probably. I guess. Would I be able to do it? She asked suddenly. I looked up sharply. It's dangerous, not to mention a very complex spell. And from what I've read, strong spells take blood, don't they? The spell on you was dark magic, right? She questioned softly. I looked at her. We both had our cloaking spells off so I could sense she was a very strong witch. Furthermore, she was also very smart and quick-witted. Oris she was trained, she would be a force to reckon with. Yes, it was dark magic, but worse. She used her own blood, a strong witch's blood, and it took her time to compress it all. She made sure the spell was unbreakable. I whispered. I was beginning to give up hope I'd ever have this seal broken. But I wouldn't mind. Being with Rayan made up for it. Deep down, I wish I wasn't confined by it either. I am her blood. Rayan murmured, almost as if saying it out loud made it real. I looked up, narrowing my eyes at her. What are you implying? I think I may be the one to be able to break this spell. I just know, I had this dream. I looked at her sharply, my heart thundering. Dreams? A witch having a dream could be more than that. What was this dream about? I asked calmly, despite the way my stomach was twisting. I was performing an unsealing spell. I remember it so clearly now, and you're there in the center of it. To start with, this dream has always been a haze, but lately, the words of the spell, the symbols, the crystals, herbs. Everything is clear. Care to share the spell and symbols? I asked. The sudden feeling that had filled me was worrying me even more. 1 sec, let me draw it. She said, grabbing her phone. She clicked the phone pen out and began drawing something on the screen. The spell was Number T. She closed her eyes, humming the words as she held the phone out to me to check the diagram she had used. With each chilling word that left her lips, along with the diagram before me, my heart felt fluttery and the urge to be sick consumed me. This was no unsealing spell. Okay, what's wrong? Rayan asked nervously, clearly worried about my reaction. I looked up at her, gripping the phone tightly. It's not an unsealing spell, Ri. This is a forbidden spell. A spell that I myself contacted the first witch of the past to get. Endora wanted it because she wanted to resurrect the first witch. This spell is... I whispered. The phone was limp in my lap, and I struggled to tell her the next part. Del, don't scare me. How do I know this spell? What does it mean? Wait, no. Is it Endora who is somehow contacting me? I think so, but not only that, the spell she's showing you is a soul transfer, and it's clear she wants my body as her host. I said quietly. I stood up, my heart thumping, the fear of Endora returning chilling me to the core. Whoa! Rayan exclaimed, jumping away from the grimoires. Hey! Relax, it's just her trying to reach this world. You're the one who inherited her powers somewhat, she will have that link with you, no? I don't want any contact with her. She was an evil woman. Did she really think I'd do that? I swear if she was alive, I'd kill her. She growled. I watched her aura swirl around her, a hybrid. I know how we can seal her off from contacting you, but first, we need to find a way to unseal your powers. She finished quietly. I didn't want to put that pressure on her. But the fact that Endora had that link to her was dangerous. The influence could be dangerous and it alarmed me. She had been able to show her this entire spell. How strong was the connection already? Please don't tell Rayan, please. She said, now placing a hand on my arm before looking down. I've been so protected all my life, I don't want them to get even more paranoid than they already are. I looked at her, I couldn't hide something like this from Rayan. This was worrying. Please, Dulsanra. She pleaded, worry and fear in her eyes. Look, we will look for a spell to unseal your powers, and then when we have it, we can get rid of Endora even being able to contact me. It's dangerous. Rayan, I don't think we should hide this. I mean, Endora, she's not someone to trifle with. If she's trying to find a way back, then we should be scared and ready. Del. I won't do anything she says. I swear, I will consult you on everything, I'm strong. I know, but Endora has ways. If she manipulates you or somehow blackmails you, she might so, you think I can actually be manipulated? She scoffed. Please, she's got nothing on me. I'm Rayan Rossi, not her granddaughter but my father's daughter. She spun towards me, raising her eyebrows expectantly. I sighed. Fine. I won't tell Rayan, but you have got to promise me, everything you dream of, you will tell me. Please Rayan. Chill, I will. She said, giving my arm a comforting squeeze, but it did nothing to calm the storm I was feeling inside. Promise me you won't tell anyone in my family. She was asking for an oath. Okay, I won't. I said, giving her a small smile. If I wanted her to trust me, then I needed to show her. But I couldn't rely on Rayan's words alone, I needed to contact someone who would be able to help us. We were two untrained witches, with powers stronger than most of our kind, and I was sure that with the right training we could destroy the entire Council of Elders at the Coven if we wanted. However, we were untrained. It took years for a witch to practice control. I looked at the grimoires. We were young witches who were given powerful spell books. A dangerous combination. Yes, we needed help, and I would find it, somehow. Shall we continue looking for an unsealing spell? We could do, but I doubt it will be in these books. Endora destroyed any proof of that spell. I said with a wry smile. She sighed, sitting down once again. Okay, at least we can try to learn some other useful stuff. Maybe we can see if we can find a solution to why you can't shift. I suggested. Dad looked through these books, but he found nothing. As a hybrid, I should be able to, right? I nodded. Yes, from what I know, there is nothing stopping you unless there's something blocking it. But what that could be, I have no idea. I sighed, pursing my lips. It would take time, but we'd get to the bottom of this. Rayan, I was sitting at my laptop, looking at Marcel, having just given him a list of rogues I wanted to question. I had been with the girls as they practiced small spells earlier, but this was something I couldn't put off any longer. What's the reason behind it? He asked, frowning deeply. Certain crimes they've committed in the past. I just want to see which of them did it willingly and which ones were forced into it by Endora. His brows furrowed as he looked at me sharply. First of all, why? If you expect me to hand my members over for questioning on something you're not even going to clarify, then it's not happening. He growled. Alejandro gave us a fresh start and they have abided by the rules of this system that you privileged wolves have always gotten. Do remember rogues lived for survival. Yes, they made mistakes, but they are trying to get that, but at the same time, these men hurt my mate. I said, my eyes blazing as I stared sharply at the screen. I get that they were given a new life, but they deserve to be punished for their crimes. Look, let's put it like this, either allow me to try them, or I come and do it myself. The choice is yours, Marcel. His eye flashed as he slammed his hand on his desk. Don't disrespect me, kid. He growled. I get that you're hurt, but I am doing my best to keep these wolves together. It isn't easy when they were not raised in the same pack. Their lifestyle was so different. I am trying, and if you just parade in and cause chaos, it's going to undo everything I've done. It's a shame we are all kept on file like criminals, but I only agreed because Alejandro said these files wouldn't get out of his hands. These files were only given to me because this involves my mate, Marcel. Tell me, if it was your mate, wouldn't you move heaven and earth to get her the justice she deserved? I said quietly, despite the anger I was feeling. He sighed and massaged his temples. He went quiet, trying to contain his anger. Fine. But at least tell me the crimes and who exactly is your mate, because I did not allow my men to hurt anyone. The only person who they may have harmed was the young witch under Endora's watch. The guilt in his voice clarified that he felt regret for his actions. I stayed silent, staring at him as his frown vanished, replaced by complete shock. The girl is your mate? But she died, didn't she? He asked in disbelief. No, but she's been through hell and back. I replied, running my fingers through my hair. He fell silent, frowning deeply as he pondered on the revelation. Very well. That child was always on my mind. She went through so much and I let it be. I knew he was under Endora's watch, but I wanted to know about his men too. The guilt that radiated off of him told me that ever should have. Dulsanra had suffered more than anyone. You may come down to my pack, bring her along if she wants. I don't want it to trigger the pain though. If this will help her heal, then so be it. What are you asked? Thinking of in terms of punishment? Those who were compelled to do as Endora wished and felt guilt afterwards will get a lashing. Those who felt no guilt even after the spell was lifted will be thrown in prison and I will deal with them personally. And those who did it willingly? He asked quietly. I smirked. Rayan's special. I said with a cold wink. He nodded. I'll send you the date and time. I said before ending the video call. I sat back, resting my elbow on the arm of my chair, spinning my chair side to side slowly and combing my fingers through my goatee. I hated that I was going to subject Dulsanra to those memories, but ultimately it would grant her closure. Speaking of my kitten, I missed her. Getting up, I decided to head back home. Tonight, Dad was going to tell Mom about Rayan too. He was nervous and I didn't blame him. Even I wasn't sure how Mom was going to take this. I came home to find Dulsanra in our bedroom. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed scheming through one of the math books I had gotten her. The basics were pretty self-explanatory, but she needed to learn them before going further. She was a fast learner, although she did look a little upset when she stared at the books that were directed at young kids, saying she really was lacking, but I had made sure she didn't think like that again. She was lost in thought and only looked up when the door shut behind me. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, walking over to her. I dropped onto the bed next to her. "Goatee." I hated that I was going to subject Dulsanra to those memories, but ultimately it would grant her closure. Speaking of my kitten, I missed her. Getting up, I decided to head back home. Tonight, Dad was going to tell Mom about Rayan too. He was nervous and I didn't blame him. Even I wasn't sure how Mom was going to take this. I came home to find Dulsanra in our bedroom. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed scheming through one of the math books I had gotten her. The basics were pretty self-explanatory, but she needed to learn them before going further. She was a fast learner, although she did look a little upset when she stared at the books that were directed at young kids, saying she really was lacking, but I had made sure she didn't think like that again. She was lost in thought and only looked up when the door shut behind me. "Hey, what's up?" I asked, walking over to her. I dropped onto the bed next to her, propped up on one elbow, cupping the back of her neck and pulling her down into a deep kiss. She kissed me back, dropping the math book and climbing on top of me, sending a rush of pleasure down south. I shifted onto my back, deepening the kiss, not letting up until she gasped for air. I just wished there was no clothing between us. "What's on your mind?" I asked, slipping her top up slightly. She shook her head. "Not much. We were looking for something to explain why Rayan can't shift without it causing her excruciating pain. That isn't normal for hybrids," she said thoughtfully. "I doubt spell books would hold those answers," I said, relishing in the way she tensed as my fingers grazed her smooth skin, not missing the way she bit back a sigh. "No, but the coven would." I frowned. "You want to go back there?" I asked. "I don't know if I want to go back there, but we do need answers. Maybe I can try searching for a witch that doesn't belong to the coven. There was a witch that helped Uncle Al give us some answers. Janina or something." I pondered. She frowned. "The name doesn't sound familiar, but if that was her given name then I might be able to locate her, maybe she could help. She hates our kind, but it's worth a try." "You are a witch after all," I said, looking up into her gorgeous blue eyes. She was radiant, from the way her skin was glowing under the sunshine to the brilliant white of her hair. I ran my fingers through the strands. "You're beyond divine, kitten," I murmured. "In your eyes, and that's all that matters," she replied. Leaning down, she kissed me softly. A soft feelings escaped her lips when I ran my tongue along them. A knock on the door disturbed us and I felt a flash of irritation. "Busy here?" I growled. "Oh, sorry." Mom's voice came. Dulsanra's eyes flew open, about to jump off when I grabbed her hips. "I don't think so. You're not going anywhere, Kitten. I'm not done. I said huskily. Baby, that was your mom. She hissed. And? I just got back, and I want to spend time with my kitten. I murmured, pulling her close and burying my nose in her neck, kissing her there. She was so hot. I flipped us in a flash, straddling her, and she gasped. Rayan. She whimpered, despite the fact that her arousal was swirling around me, clearly showing me she was turned on. It was driving me crazy. I'll be a quick, kitten, and I'll try going easy so you can at least walk to dinner tonight. I growled. Sounds like a plan, she said, biting her lip softly. Her eyes changed to that same reddish gold, the outline appearing darker and her lips deepening in color, looking fuller. A change that I was seeing more often. Although it made me wonder what she was, I didn't really care. Her arms locked around my neck and I kissed her hungrily, not caring about the slight change in her scent either. It only drove me crazier and made me instantly hard. Regardless of what this change in her was, she was still my mate, one that I loved. Tulsanra I could walk when we were done, and Rayan was finding it incredibly amusing. The man was hot, but he was a tease. It had taken me at least an hour before I felt my legs were up to bearing my weight a little. I hated that I couldn't tell him about Rayana's dreams, but I had promised her. It was now time for dinner. We had showered and gotten dressed. I had opted for a sky blue satin wrap dress with long cuffed balloon sleeves. I was about to put some tights on, but watching Rayan's eyes trail over my legs made me decide to simply put on some white heels instead. I pinned my hair back from the center, making a small quiff like Rayana had shown me. We were now seated around the dining table, which was made out of actual marble. I could see the flecks of gold in it, elegant, modern, yet very glamorous. The food is delicious, I said, eating some of the chicken. I was seated next to Rayan, with Rayana opposite me next to her mom, and Papa Raf at the head of the table. That's good, the cooks are excellent. Especially since Raphael here is a very fussy eater. Maria said. Papa Raf looked up, reminding me of a deer caught in headlights. In my defense, I just don't like vegetables, he said, pouting. Come on Mari darling, do you blame me when I have someone as perfect as you as my mate? What have vegetables and mom got to do with each other? Rayana said before scrunching her nose. You, Dad. I hope it's not what I think it is. Maria shook her head, whilst Papa Raf just grinned. Then you should really zip it, Ri. Rayan smirked, his fingers brushing circles on my leg, sending tingles through me and making my core ache. Oh yeah Mom, what did you want earlier? My cheeks heated up as I stared down at my plate, feeling so mortified. Oh. It was nothing important, nothing that can't wait, she said with a small smile. Well, since that's not important, there's something I want to share with you all. Papa Raf said, looking at us all, although his focus was on Maria. Oh? Maria asked, raising an eyebrow as she ate gracefully. Rayan's hand stopped tracing circles, resting his hand on my thigh, his fingers dangerously close to my core. Despite us being wolves. Maria, you know my mother was a hybrid, and I am to some extent immune to certain things, which I actually realize is quite common in males from which bloodlines. Maria froze and I realized that was a very good point. Although Rayan didn't have as much immunity as his father, who did have all the traits of a man born of witches. You are not one of them, she said, coldly placing her fork down. I can't deny that my mother was one. Regardless of the path she chose, she didn't define me. He said quietly, taking her hand. You are not one of them, she exclaimed, trying to pull her hand free, but he refused to let go. My own heart was thundering and I could see the pain in Rayana's eyes too. Why are you even talking nonsense, Raphael? She cried angrily. Because I'm saying you still love me, despite the fact I am her blood. She is the one responsible for the death of your brother, your friends, and our pack members, not the entire witch community. His voice was soothing. I could see from the tender love in his eyes that he truly loved the woman before him, and even causing her this much distress was hurting him too. It was painful to watch. I looked at Rayan, who was watching keenly yet remained emotionless. That's not the same. Stop it, Raphael. I hate them, their kind, their offspring, to their very existence may they all rot in hell. She shouted, Rayan's eyes flashed, and Rayana gasped, jumping up from her seat and knocking her chair back. I'm a witch, Mom! She cried out, her eyes blurred with tears. R.I. Rayan murmured, that was not the plan. Maria spun towards her, her face ghost white as she looked at her daughter from head to toe. Yes, Mom. That's why I can't mind Link, not because of something being wrong with my wolf, it's because I'm a hybrid. She cried out, whispering something then lowering her cloaking spell. Maria's heart was pounding as she looked at Rayan, Papa Raf, and me. You all knew this. She whispered, TIGHT-LIPPED.CO. We were all standing now. The tension was suffocating. Maria, for obvious reasons, I just won't talk to me now. She shouted, her eyes flashing, he canines elongating as she stepped away from her mate and daughter. Mom! I'm still your daughter. Rayana said quietly. No witch can ever be my daughter. She hissed. The gasps, followed by the silence in the room, was painful. I wanted to move towards Rayana, who looked shell-shocked, tears streaming down her cheeks. The pain radiating off her was excruciating, but I felt moving might trigger Maria even more. Papa Raf looked broken. Mom! Rayan said, look, calm down, and don't say something you will regret. No. I don't regret it, this sick joke. This. You were all in on this. And as for her, she jerked her head towards Rayana. She needs to leave or I will. I'm still just Rayana, Mama. Rayana said, walking over to her mom and trying to grab hold of her, only for Maria to jerk away fearfully. Stay away. Rayana. Papa Rao was about to go to her, don't Raphael. Maria warned. She's my daughter, Maria. Raphael replied with disapproval. And I'm your mate. It's your choice. Mom. Rayan muttered just as I rushed around to Rayana, making to reach for her. She moved back, shaking her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I will not choose. Papa Raf growled. Then I will leave, Maria said. I hate them, Raphael, with every cell in my body. I resent them. She's your daughter, he thundered, his aura rolling off them. You guys need to calm down. Mom, chill and have some time out. Rayan interjected. There's nothing to calm down over, I won't ever accept this. She needs to get rid of her witch side, I know what they are like. They are vile creatures. I zoned out when I felt the huge storm surge behind me. My head snapped towards Rayhana. She was clutching her head. I glanced back at Rayan and his parents. I could no longer hear them. The thudding of my own heart and Rayhana's was growing. The surge of her powers, making the ground tremble. I could hear it before it even registered to the wolves in the room. Move! I shouted. I chanted a spell spinning around and raised my hands, just as 1,000 knife-like blades blasted from her, a move that Endora relished. Rayan. The only thing on my mind was protecting the man I loved. I whispered a spell creating a barrier, raising my hand as the vicious shards hammered against it. Dulsanra. I couldn't move. The power she held was immense. I was forced to go down on one knee, my own powers pushed to the max. Need my own power. Rayhana's strangled scream filled the air, she was out of control. A hurricane of wind was destroying the room, the lights went out and I heard the windows shattering. She couldn't rein it in. The force was too much. Leave! I shouted. I am not leaving you. Rayan growled from somewhere far behind me, but there I wasn't much we could do. It's safer if you go. I shrieked. The pain in my chest was growing. I couldn't hold out for much longer. I could taste blood in my mouth. I felt the strain against my seal, but it was futile. I couldn't think anymore. Hoping they had moved to safety, I fell onto all fours, my barrier shattering as I coughed up blood. Flinching, when I saw a new wave of shards spearing towards me. I closed my eyes, readying for the impact, just hoping Rayan was okay. When suddenly I felt soft fur brush against me, looking up in shock when Rayan jumped in the way to shield me. No! I cried, closing my eyes when I heard the shards impale skin. The smell of blood filled the air. No! Rayana's emotions were out of control, her powers surging into a storm of knives, it was rolling off her in waves. The moment Mom saw Dulsanra raise her barrier she had frozen. Dad pulled her away and I rushed towards Dulsanra, pushing against the powerful surge of magic. It was slowing me down but I managed to get to Dulsanra just as her barrier gave way. Ready for the impact of Rayana's out-of-control power. But it never came. I looked up sharply as another scent filled the air and I stared at Chris's gold-colored wolf that was in front of me. My eyes flew open as the smell of blood coated the air, a Dulsanra's cry hitting home until suddenly everything stilled. Chris! I shouted through the link, fear filling me as his huge wolf fell to the ground and he shifted to human form. His entire back and side were ripped open, he was losing blood fast. Oh no! Rayana's horror-filled voice came as she looked at Chris. She rushed over as Dulsanra crawled towards Chris too. She whispered a spell, and I could see the glow that wrapped around his injured torso, covering his gaping wounds. Blood was trickling out of her nose and mouth, she was shaking. I shifted back and gripped her waist, supporting her weight and mind, linking the pack doctor to hurry to the mansion. My own heart was thrumming in my ears, my mate was weakened, my friend was injured. No, no, no. What have I done? Rayan cried, snapping me from my thoughts. Stay calm. Dulsanra whispered. Rose quartz, obsidian, and pyrite, now. He will die if we don't hurry, this magic is dangerous. Tell me the spell to save him. Rayan said, shaking as she looked down at Chris's lifeless body, his heartbeat dimming fast. We need supplies first. Dulsanra coughed. Anything else? I asked, trying to remain calm. Chamomile, echinacea root, ginkgo leaf, and ginger root. I will tell Rayan the spell, but we need to move fast. She said, her eyes were now burning orange and I could feel her energy increase a little. I nodded. The fear that we may lose Chris terrified me as I left the room swiftly. Rayan, the fear that bled through every vein in my body was making me shake. Chris! I had hurt him. Please don't die. Tears blurred my eyes as I whispered the spell that Dulsanra had just repeated to me, keeping his blood from spilling from his body like water from a tap. She was exhausted as she began using the blood that covered the ground to draw some symbols on the floor. Where would be without her? She had protected Mom, Dad, and Rayan. If Rayan didn't jump in, I would have killed her, and if Chris hadn't jumped in, I would have hurt Rayan. All three were people I cared about. I looked down into his handsome face, trying not to cry. I needed to fix this. Is he okay? Dad's voice made me look up sharply. The entire left side of the room was destroyed. I could see the gardens of the mansion through the broken parts of the wall. I couldn't see where Mom was, but she didn't take it well. She hated me. Rayan. Calm down. Dad murmured. I gasped, realizing I was getting worked up once again. I nodded, focusing on the spell, containing his bleeding. My mind flittered to our moment back in my room. Because you're more than that, the way he lowered my top. My eyes stung with more tears. I did this. I was dangerous. That spell, that power. It almost felt like a second voice had chanted that spell. I swear I didn't. I didn't cast any spell, especially one that was so brutal. I was upset, not angry. I whimpered as Dad moved away. Taking his shirt off, he placed it over Chris's lower section. Can I help Dulsanra? He whispered. I looked up at them. I had hurt them too. Dad was cut in a few places but he was healing, but Dulsanra. I frowned, realizing her eyes were blazing orange, her skin was radiant, and despite the fact she was shaking, she was managing to draw the symbols with precision. I returned my attention to Chris after hearing Dad say that the doctor was also on his way. I'm sorry, Chris. When you get better, I swear I will make it up to you. No matter what. But before that, I would make sure I gave him a scolding for jumping in front of us so recklessly. Rayan was back with the candles, herbs, and crystals, wearing a pair of basketball shorts. Dulsanra instructed them on where to set the candles, using the herbs and setting the crystals before she looked at me. This was it. I needed to heal him. Dad and Rayan gently lifted Chris into the middle of the symbols and Dulsanra came over to me. I frowned, noticing her slightly rounder hips and her narrower waist, if that was even possible. She looked really good. I narrowed my eyes, stumbling back from her. There was something off about her. You need to pay attention to the spell, she said softly, even her voice sounded sensual. I nodded, looking into her mesmerizing goldish red eyes. She said the spell slowly and I repeated after her. After 3 attempts, I got it right. This was it. I took a deep breath, looking down at Chris's handsome face. I will fix this. Here goes nothing. Rayan, the spell had succeeded. Halfway through it Dulsanra had fainted, returning to her usual self. I had carried her to bed and had the doctor look her over. After all, the secret was pretty much out. All the guards had rushed forward the moment Rayana's powers had gotten out of control. I knew we would need to do some major damage control. Dad had actually knocked Mom unconscious just so he could come back inside to deal with things. This was a mess. I didn't want to leave Dulsanra alone, but there were things I needed to do. The electricity was out but we had candles lit. I kissed Dulsanra softly, tucking her into the bedding, and running my fingers through her hair. She had so recklessly tried to protect us. If it wasn't for her, Chris would have been dead. The fear I felt when I thought I might lose her. I kissed her mate Mark passionately, my emotions consuming me, inhaling her scent deeply. I quickly wrote a note, just in case she woke up, setting it on the chest of drawers near the candle, letting her know was just downstairs and to call me when she woke up. I exited the room, shutting the door behind me quietly to see Rayana coming out of the room where Chris was. Ray. R.I. We looked at each other and I gave her a small wry smile. Going over to her, I pulled her into my arms. She tensed before she began crying. I'm sorry. I did so much damage. I almost killed someone. She sobbed. I let her cry, kissing the top of her head softly, and letting her take her time. It wasn't your fault. Mom's words were harsh. I said quietly. One thing was crystal clear though, out of control, she could be dangerous. If it wasn't for Del, things could have been a lot worse. Ray. Can I ask something? Go on. I said as she pulled away wiping her eyes. What is Dulsanra? My eyes widened in shock. I wasn't expecting her to have noticed. Up until Dulsanra had fainted she was in her other form. That wasn't a witch. She looked. Is it weird to say appealing? She blushed embarrassingly, and I looked at her in surprise. So, it wasn't just me who thought that. But for someone like Rayana to think the same. Care to explain? I asked, crossing my arms. It's just. She looked. I mean she's gorgeous, but when she kind of changed, she looked better than ever. She said apologetically. I frowned. Well, I don't know what she is, but she is different. I said quietly. Rayan, can you come downstairs? Dad's link interrupted us. I got to go, Dad wants to see me. Don't be too hard on yourself, R.I., we will figure this out. I said, cupping her face for a second. She nodded, her large brown eyes full of regret and worry. I was walking down the hall when she called me. Rayan. I looked over my shoulder at her. Are there some other supernatural beings out there besides the ones we've been told? Rayan, our eyes met, but despite his racing heart, he didn't speak. A frown on his face as he took in my words. I got to go, he murmured before turning and hurrying down the stairs. I sighed, deciding to shower as I was covered in blood and dirt. Once I had showered, I looked in the mirror whilst toweling my hair, thinking over the voice in my head. Now thinking of it, in my dreams it was similar. Like it wasn't me, but it was. That wasn't just my powers going out of control, I used a spell in that state. My stomach twisted as I remembered Dulsanra's words over Endora's link to me. My entire body felt cold at just the thought that maybe she was already influencing me without me even realizing. I shook my head, sighing heavily. I quickly pulled on a pair of silk shorts and a cami before wrapping my matching rich teal-colored robe around myself and leaving my room. Padding down the hall back to where Chris was. I opened the door slowly and slid inside, shutting it behind me. I walked over to the bed, looking down at his pale face. Even though he looked as handsome as ever, he was pasty. A real-life Hercules. I sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. I moved the blanket back, looking at his body that was now injury-free. It had been a powerful spell, because even now I still felt weakened. Dulsanra's words before she fainted rang in my head. You're strong enough to do this. I knew if I hadn't been, he would have died. I looked away, the pain at the very thought hurt, but at the same time, I had to remember that we were nothing. I brushed my fingers down his jaw. I know I cared for him, despite how angry he made me, the fact he rejected me. But still there was something inside of me that pulled me towards him. Why was the urge to forget all his irritating qualities and forgive him so strong? Even before he almost died. I brushed my fingers through his hair, that day flashing through my mind as I felt my stomach flutter. His touch. The feel of his plush lips against mine. I bit my lip just as his eyes suddenly opened and he shot up, making me tumble back and off the bed in alarm until I landed. Ouch! He looked around, his heart thudding as his eyes snapped down towards me on the ground. I glared back, blushing at how humiliating this was as I got to my feet, rubbing my ass. Was that payback? I said, looking into those piercing green eyes that for a moment earlier I thought I may never see again. I think I would have liked it if I was the one dunking you on your purpose. Besides, there's plenty of meat on that booty to cushion that fall. He said with one of his smirks. But for once, I didn't care that he was being his usual self-centered self, I was just glad he was awake. And well. To hug him was strong, but I stayed rooted to my spot. Why did you do it? I blurted out as I stood there staring at him. He raised an eyebrow. Do elaborate. Although I'm as smart as I have done a lot in life, what do you mean exactly? He asked, placing his arms behind his head as he lay back down. My eyes trailed over his chest and abs as I bit my lip. Eyes up here, princess. I glared at him, my mind going back to my question. Stepped in front of Rayan. He's an alpha. He heals faster. I said quietly. His smirk vanished. He frowned, his jaw ticked, and those lips pursed as he looked away for a moment. Because if you did end up killing someone, it's better it's someone you hate rather than someone you love. His words sent a sharp sting of pain through me. I glared at him. How dare he? My chest heaved as I stepped closer to the bed, and to both our surprise, I slapped him across the face. What was that for? He growled, sitting up once again. I don't hate you. I cried in frustration. How dare he? I raised my fist, ready to hit him again. Oh yeah? Then what? Did you fall in love with me, princess? He said mockingly, catching my wrist as he pulled me closer. His words made my eyes fly open. My heart was pounding as I stared into his eyes. His smug look vanished as he held my gaze. Don't get too full of yourself, handsome. I replied, my voice coming out softer than it was meant to. His scent intoxicated me, and his gaze dipped to my lips. Am I getting full of myself, princess? Or am I just reading you like an open book? He murmured. His hand was still wrapped around my wrist. Don't play with my emotions, Chris. I said, quietly tugging out of his hold. The pain in my chest was suffocating me. Sorry. He said quietly, looking away. And just like that, the room fell into a tense silence. I don't know what he and I were, but we were oceans apart, just two people who should never be in the same room together. Turned away from him, my heart beating rapidly. From today on, I was going to avoid him before I fell so hard that he would break me completely. Anyway, glad you're fine. Good night, Chris. I said, making sure my voice was as unbothered as always. Thank you for saving my life, Rayan. His words were soft and didn't hold any of their usual smugness. You're welcome. And thank you, because you thought I'd feel worse if I hurt my brother. I left the room, not able to stay any longer, closing it softly behind me. Goodbye, Chris. Yes, I will see him again. But I couldn't do this tug of war between us, not anymore. I would protect my heart for my mate before the playboy in the room behind me destroys it completely. I returned to my own room. Sitting on my bed, I stared at the moon shining outside. Mom's words flitted through my mind. And the painful tug inside returned. I wrapped my arms around my knees, tucking them up against my chest. Me being a witch had made Mom forget that, above all, I was her daughter. Rayan, and that's how Dulsanra protected us. Dad finished. Uncle Al was on video call, smoking away as he stood on one of his balconies. Lola's dad, Beta Jack, was here too, along with Lola. Dad had given some of the men orders on the repairs. For now, they had just gotten the electricity sorted. We had just finished filling Beta Jack, Uncle Al, and Lola in on stuff. Although Lola knew enough, Beta Jack seemed stunned, but he didn't react negatively. I had mentioned Dulsanra first. After all, she once again protected us. Uncle Al was just listening quietly, a frown on his face. Beta Jack sat back, pale. So, our future Luna and our princess both witches? Yes. Dad said from where he was perched on the edge of his desk. This will be a lot for the pack to take in. Beta Jack said quietly. I know, but I don't think anyone will react as badly as Maria. I didn't think she would react this badly myself. However, I will deal with her. Dad replied, sighing heavily. She's not so far from her mother-in-law then, if she's turning on her own kids. Maybe remind her of that. Uncle Al said coldly. She needs time. Dad replied slightly defensively. I know he knew Mom was in the wrong, but she was still his mate. Oh yeah? Do you really think time is going to change her opinion? No matter how much time passes, she still hates me. But that's valid. I'm just saying. She's a stubborn one and this is her daughter. Dad remained silent, but I knew Uncle was right. Mom's negativity can affect Rayhana, as we saw. I said. And if her emotions go out of control, send her to my pack, and I'll take care of her. Uncle said suddenly. I was grateful. Dad looked up and nodded. I could tell you hate witches too, right? He asked his younger brother. Yeah, those who attacked us. If I'm fine with Dulsanra, then I'm fine with my niece. Send her down, Kiara gets bored at home alone anyway. I smiled slightly. Got to love the way Uncle Al cared but pretended not to give a shit. Nice to see how sweet you are, Uncle. Don't make it a habit though, it doesn't suit you. I mocked. Good point. Want me to come down and rough up that pretty boy face of yours? He shot back, smirking coldly. Are you that jealous of my good looks, Uncle? Or is it the fact you're 30-6 and counting so beginning to lack on the Rossi charm? I smirked. He raised an eyebrow. I created the hot gene. Can you two stop it? Dad sighed. I could tell he was mentally drained. I sat back, feeling a little better knowing that Rayhana was going to be in safe hands. I also knew it eased Dad's worries. What are we going to do, Raphael? Beta Jack asked quietly. Is there anything I can do? Lola asked from where she stood behind my seat. Okay, so this is the plan, for now. Those who witnessed it have been ordered to stay quiet. I will have a word with them tomorrow myself. As for the rumors, let them be, I will address them soon enough. Rayhan, you were going to go to Marcel's pack anyway, move it forward. Take Dulsanra and go. On the way, you can drop Rayhana to Al's pack. I nodded. You're going there? Did you talk to him? Uncle Al asked, his eyes glinting. I did. I told him about Dulsanra too. He nodded. I know this is about your mate. But he's been through shit too, as have his pack, take that into account. He said, taking a drag on his cigarette. My eyes flashed as I looked at him. If it was Kiara? Would you say the same thing? I asked. His jaw ticked, and a tense silence fell between us. All I'm saying is just think before you act. I didn't say don't get justice for her. Yet. I'm going to do what I need to do. I said quietly, standing up. Anyway, I'm off to bed. Have a think on his words, Rayhan. For me, Dad said gently. I gave Lola a one-armed hug before walking out. I was not going to listen to anyone, not after the shit my mate's gone through. Even if this end thing up. If only they had felt her pain, seen what she had suffered. The memory I saw came to the forefront of my mind. Like I said, if I had to fight the world for her, I would. I headed to the kitchen, taking a glass drink bottle from the fridge before walking up to my bedroom. I looked at her sleeping in bed and knew she had transformed. I could tell from the way that something extra was added to her scent. I actually wanted to ask Dad if he had felt the change, but I didn't want to hear something similar to what Rayan had said. Yeah, no way. I walked over to the bed. Leaning down, I kissed her cherry-colored lips. Relishing in the pleasure of the contact before forcing myself back, my eyes raked over her body. She was clad only in the shirt I had pulled over her before I had changed her earlier. It clung to her curves perfectly, and although I was tempted to play with her, I covered her up and got into bed, picking up the laptop I had on the side of my drawer. Flipping it open, I switched it on as I bit the metal cap off of the bottle. Taking a swig, I placed it down and opened a web page, typing in one simple sentence. List of supernatural beings. The internet wasn't going to give me correct answers. But it would give me ideas. One thing I knew for sure was that my little kitten was something else. But the question was, what? I didn't give up. Even when I saw Dulsanra return to her normal state in her sleep or the way she curled up against me in her sleep, I continued to search. 3 hours later, I had gone through countless links, websites, lore, myths, legends. Just like werewolves, vampires, wendigos, etc. There were so many versions out there, but behind each story, there was a source of truth. I had finally rounded it down to one option. I stared at the computer screen, fighting my sleep as I stared at the words on the screen. Was this what Dulsanra was? I mean, it would make sense considering she was called the Daughter of Darkness. But was this even possible? I cleared my search history and shut my laptop down. Was it necessary to even know? I remembered the fire in the bathroom. It was not her witch powers, just like her extremely sharp hearing. I lay down, pulling her into my arms, inhaling her scent. Soothing calmness washed over me, and I smiled slightly. The effect this snowflake had on me was beyond amazing. I was glad I had her. Despite the painful hard-ons I was constantly inflicted with, she was still my perfect little kitten. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.